Hello everybody, this is Dr. Jenkins, and this is going to be the introduction video for our lab on the respiratory system. We're going to have some fun as always. Let's go with red today. All right, so as you can see here in the introduction, we just finished talking about the heart and the blood, which is the cardiovascular system. So this is a logical next step. We know that the circulatory system, the cardiovascular system, we know the heart pumps out blood throughout the body. Great. Well, one part of that, as you remember, is the pulmonary circuit, which was the part of the heart that sent blood to the lungs to pick up oxygen. So indeed, the respiratory system and cardiovascular system work together. What good would it be for the heart to pump out blood if it didn't contain oxygen? It wouldn't be any good. So these work together. All right, make sure that you review the functions of the respiratory system. Ventilation, which is breathing. We have to inhale and we have to exhale. So the fancy word for breathing is ventilation. And then we do gas exchange. And there's two types of gas exchange. You can see, we talked about ventilation. There's external respiration and internal respiration. It's really important that you get these straight. External respiration is the gas exchange between the lungs, more particularly the alveoli of the lungs, and the blood. Okay? This is the first gas exchange. We breathe in air through inhalation, and then that air makes its way all the way down our airways into the lungs. And once we get to the smallest part of the lungs, the alveoli, there is a gas exchange that takes place between the lungs, the alveoli, and the blood surrounding it. Later on, we do our second gas exchange, which is gas exchange between that same blood that is now oxygenated and the tissues. To help you in this process, I have a diagram here, and it might look a little busy, but as we go through it, I think it will make more sense. So if we go back to these steps, ventilation, external respiration, and internal respiration, these are the functions, right? Well, let's put them all together. So what is the first thing that has to happen? Ventilation, which is breathing. So in this picture, the red arrow is showing you inhalation. So we'll just talk about that to start. So we breathe in air. That air makes its way all the way through the airways and down into the lungs. If we expand upon the lungs, we can see these structures called alveoli. These are the air sacs of the lungs. What's happening here is our first gas exchange. It's the second step, and this is called external respiration. It might be weird that it's called external, but it's called external because it's bringing in air from the outside of the body. So here at the alveoli, we're exchanging gases between the alveoli and the lungs. Okay? It's important that you know the direction of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Oxygen, let's see, how can we do this? All right. Oxygen is going to move from the lungs into the blood. Okay? Oxygen moves from the lungs into the blood, so this direction. Versus carbon dioxide, which has built up in the bloodstream. Carbon dioxide is going to move from the blood back into the lungs. All right? Carbon dioxide is going to move from the blood back into the lungs, and then we're going to breathe it out. So if I go back here, let's expand upon this. If we're talking about external respiration, oxygen moves into the blood. And I'll change colors just so this is easier to see. Let's do blue. And CO2 moves into the lungs. All right? Good. So we started off by breathing or ventilating. We brought air in through the airways, all the way down to the lungs, where we have our first gas exchange called external respiration, gas exchange between the lungs and the blood. Oxygen moves from the lungs into the blood. Carbon dioxide moves from the blood back into the lungs. Our third step is what's here in green. So now that we have oxygenated blood in the lungs, that of course goes back to the heart, and the heart is going to pump out that oxygenated blood. So we have to transport these gases in blood. I'm doing this in sequential order because I think it helps us put it all together. So if it feels overwhelming, just listen. Listen to me going through it all, play it over again, and it should get clearer. So we have to breathe in air first, ventilation. Air makes its way all the way down the airways into the lungs, where we have our first gas exchange, which is external respiration. Oxygen moves from the lungs into the blood. Carbon dioxide moves from the blood into the lungs. Well, now that oxygen-rich blood from the lungs goes back to the heart, and the heart pumps it out to the body. And we transport that oxygenated blood through the body in the blood vessels. Eventually, we get to our tissues. So it could be an organ like the liver, which is right here. Could be a muscle, like one of the quad muscles here. But in the tissues, we have our final gas exchange, which is called internal respiration. So now we have transmitted that oxygenated blood all the way down to all of our tissues in the body, organs, muscles, skin, you name it. And in this case, we are going to, let me use orange. In this case, we are going to transfer oxygen into the tissues. And on the other hand, we are going to move CO2 from the tissues back into the blood. All right, let me go back to the slide before, we'll fill that in. So with external respiration, O2, which is oxygen, moves into the tissues, which was the whole goal of this. And then CO2 moves back into the blood. All right. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is how we all put it together. We have to breathe in, the oxygen travels through our airways to our alveoli, where we have our first gas exchange. Then we pump that blood out through the body. And then at all of our tissues, we have a second gas exchange where we move oxygen into the tissues and move carbon dioxide back into the blood because it's a waste product. And that carbon dioxide goes back into the blood, which goes back up to the heart. And we'll eventually breathe out that CO2. All right, good stuff, my friends. The next part is anatomy. It starts here. I'm going to let you review that on your own. I know you've had it in lecture 2. You will see on Blackboard there are labeled and unlabeled pictures of the respiratory structures. And you'll also see a video where at the beginning of that video I review the structures. Lastly, I'd like you to review the mechanics of breathing, which is inhalation and exhalation. I've given you a nice review here. but it's also in the second half of the video. All right, so off you go, everyone. Good luck as always.